It was a difficult childhood, to say the least. And I think that gives me a fire in my belly for what I do today, and that there's got to be a better way. And if girls knew the love of the Lord early, they may not have made the struggles and the mistakes that I did as a young girl and a young teen.
I want to talk about a book that you recently wrote, and the book is called Why Curse the Darkness When You Can Light a Candle? And I love the subtitle of this book. The subtitle is A Story of Trust and Obedience to Inspire Those Who Desire to Make a Kingdom Impact, Yet Struggle with the Fear of Inadequacy. I think that's one of the best subtitles I've ever heard, because that's, I think, what most of us want, whether we're making an impact, a kingdom impact through homeschooling our kids or through serving in church or whatever it is that we're doing. We often have that fear of inadequacy. And so I would love for you to talk about your journey of God's faithfulness and what he's done through you to make a kingdom impact.
You know, it all starts back when I was a young girl, honestly. I was raised by a chronically ill dad. He was handicapped, you might say. He had acute multiple sclerosis. So I never knew him to walk. Matter of fact, he brought me down the aisle with his electric wheelchair because I insisted that he do that. He was an amazing man of faith. His body was weak and broken, but he was a strong tower to me. And we had a most beautiful relationship as a father-daughter. My mother had raised 5 kids, and it was very difficult for her to deal with all of this, and then having to go and be the primary breadwinner without a college education. And so she turned to alcohol instead of to the Lord, did not know the Lord in the same way that my father did. And so it was a difficult childhood, to say the least. And I think that gives me a fire in my belly for what I do today, and that there's got to be a better way. And if girls knew the love of the Lord early, they may not have made the struggles and the mistakes that I did as a young girl and a young teen. With that being said, I was not a Christian at the time. I knew the ways of the Lord, in that I knew that Jesus was king, but my faith tradition was not one of relationship with the Lord, if you understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
And so I'm so very grateful that at least I had that nugget. Because when I was faced with some really hard decisions, as I had made bad decisions in college, and I became pregnant in college with my child, with my husband, who's currently my husband, and we made that work. It was not an easy way to start, and it was certainly not the way the Lord would have wanted it, but the Lord honored that decision. And I believe if I did not have my faith component, it could have been a much worse decision. Well, that little lady, that little baby that I had, her name's Rachel. And at the age of 4, Rachel had been playing with some neighbor kids. Pat and I were off to look for a new home. We were being relocated. My parents-in-law were babysitting my daughter, and they were playing badminton with the next door neighbors and having a great time, sort of whipping that badminton racket to hear the wind go. And that was a lot of fun, but not until it landed in Rachel's temple. And that knocked her out to a point where she hit her head very hard. My mother-in-law, who was babysitting, as I mentioned, she's an RN. She checked for anything that could be a concussion and did all the right protocol. But a week later, Rachel was wrestling, as she would call it, wrestling with her daddy. And she started to vomit profusely. And we couldn't get her to stop vomiting. So we brought her to the ER up in Columbus, Ohio. And they said, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Garibay, you've got a big issue here. Your 4-year-old daughter has a cerebral hematoma in the left quadrant of her brain that is the size of a golf ball.
Oh, wow.
It's in an inoperable area of the brain, and she is going to continue to have seizures. And so they put her in 24-hour observation for 2-3 weeks. And across from her was a young man that was also in the same neurosurgery ward, and he was a quadriplegic at that point. He had the trach and the whole 9 yards at 9 yards. 9, whatever I want to say. But I'll tell you what, in my mommy brain, Yvette, I thought that is what is going to happen to my daughter. And so I was new to the faith. I can't say that I was saved at that point. I was going back to church. My husband and I knew that was what was going to be good for our kids. And so we were seeking. I tried to make changes in the local church to have a nursery, and they said no. So I literally opened up the yellow pages, looked for a church that had a nursery, and went to that church. It happened to be a Nazarene church. It was one of those really old congregations, a bit of fire and brimstone, but I'll tell you, those people loved on us. And during that time when we were so weak and so desperate, they prayed for us. They fed us. They took care of our second daughter. They did all the things that we as Christians should do to those all around us.
Yeah.
And I made that proverbial bet at that time with the Lord. And I know we shouldn't go to the Lord this way, but this is the way I did it. I said, Lord, if you will save my daughter, I will serve you the rest of my life. Mm. And he honored that. And I've honored him. And that is what's led to the start of American Heritage Girls. It was through Mama's grief, not just at the potential passing of her daughter, Rachel, whose name means little lamb. And I thought, Lord, do I have to sacrifice this baby to be in your will? And if so be it, if that's true. But the Lord has been faithful. And today, as we go on with 30 years of ministry, and I announced my retirement, my board of trustees did a national search of over 400 candidates, and they have recently named that little lamb, Rachel, the nascence of my faith, to be the next leader of American Heritage Girls.
Wow.
And so, Yvette, that story I never would have told you before I wrote this book, because this book had to be written. The Lord kept saying to me, Psalm 78:6, write it down so the next generation would know. I decided to self-publish, by the way, because I was so concerned. I'm very, very clear on what the fight with the Girl Scouts was in regards to starting American Heritage Girls, because I fought the good fight, but the things that they did to me was people would not believe. Yeah. And I was afraid that a publisher would take that out because it was controversial, but it was all true. And so we self-published. That story's in there, as well as the story of Rachel and the fact that I almost aborted her, because that was what college girls did back then.
Yeah.
It was shortly after Roe v. Wade, and that was what was available. But the Lord has been so faithful, and Yvette, the things he's done, the doors he's opened, the relationships he's allowed, the blessings that he's put on our family from then until now, and will continue to do so, generation upon generation. I can't even articulate it. It's been so amazing to see.
Homeschool Insights is sponsored by CTC Math. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com and try it for free. For more great homeschool inspiration and resources, listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday.